I always thought my dad was the most loyal man I knew. Turns out, I didn't even know half his life. He passed away suddenly last year from a heart attack. I was devastated. He was my hero, my biggest supporter, the one who taught me how to ride a bike and never give up on anything. Mom was heartbroken, of course, but she handled all the paperwork and funeral stuff while I tried to hold it together. A few weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer asking me to come in for a reading of the will. I thought it was weird since my mom was already handling everything. But when I got there, I saw another woman sitting in the office, with 2 kids around my age. I remember the lawyer saying, "It seems we need to divide the assets among all 3 of his children." I froze. "What do you mean 3? The woman, quiet and nervous, looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know he told you nothing." Turns out my dad had another family, a woman he'd been seeing for nearly 20 years. The kids, my half-siblings, had known about me their entire lives. They even had pictures of me on their walls because he told them I was their other sister. But he never told me anything. I went home that night and just sat in my car for hours, crying. I felt like my whole childhood had been a lie. How could someone so loving, so present, also be living a double life? My mom admitted she'd always suspected something, but didn't want to destroy the family. I didn't talk to either side for months, but eventually I met my half-siblings for coffee. They were kind. They looked so much like him it hurt. We talked for hours, and maybe in some strange way I realized he was deeply flawed, but we were all just pieces of him trying to make sense of the wreckage he left behind. Before that phone call, before the lawyer's office, before my world split cleanly down the middle, there was just Dad. Just the man who made pancakes on Sunday mornings, who sang off-key to classic rock in the car, who never missed a single one of my soccer games, even when he had to leave work early. My childhood memories are full of him. His large, calloused hands guided mine as I learned to write my name. His laugh, loud and uninhibited, echoing through our house during family game nights. The way he'd ruffle my hair and call me kiddo, even when I was too old for it, even when I pretended to be annoyed. Dad worked in construction management. He left early most mornings, thermos of coffee in one hand, lunch packed by Mom in the other. He'd come home tired, smelling of sawdust and sweat, but he always had energy for me. Always had time to help with homework or throw a ball in the backyard until the streetlights came on. Never half-ass anything, he'd tell me, whether I was building a school project or learning to parallel park. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. I believed in those words. I believed in him. Mom and Dad seemed happy. They had their rhythms, their inside jokes, their Saturday date nights when they'd get dressed up and go to the Italian restaurant downtown. They'd been together since high school, one of those rare couples that actually made it. Childhood sweethearts turned lifelong partners, or so I thought. There were things, looking back now, that should have been clues. The business trips that seemed frequent but were never quite explained in detail. The second cell phone he carried, which he said was for work. The way he'd sometimes stare off into space at dinner, somewhere far away, before snapping back with a smile and asking about my day. But I was young, and then I was a teenager wrapped up in my own drama, and then I was away at college trying to figure out who I was. The gaps in Dad's presence, the unexplained absences, the occasional weekend when he couldn't make it home, they all had reasonable explanations. Work was demanding. Clients needed him. Projects ran over. I never questioned it. Why would I? He was Dad, solid as bedrock, dependable as sunrise. The night before he died, we talked on the phone. I'd called to tell him about a promotion I'd gotten at work. Nothing major, just a small step up, but I was excited. He was proud. I could hear it in his voice, that warmth that always made me feel like I could conquer anything. "That's my girl," he said. "I always knew you'd go far. You've got that fire, that determination. Never let anyone dim it." "Thanks, Dad. I learned from the best." He was quiet for a moment. I remember that pause, though I didn't think anything of it then. Now I wonder what he was thinking, if he was carrying the weight of his secrets. If he wanted to tell me something but couldn't find the words. "I love you, kiddo," he finally said. "Don't ever forget that. Love you too, Dad." Those were the last words we exchanged. He died the next morning on a job site, clutching his chest, gone before the ambulance arrived. I'm 54 years old. No warning, no goodbye. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and casseroles, of people telling me he was in a better place and lived a full life. I stood beside Mom at the wake, shaking hands with people whose faces I couldn't quite focus on, accepting condolences that felt hollow in my grief-numbed state. So many people came. Co-workers, old friends, neighbors, extended family I hadn't seen in years. Everyone had a story about Dad, how he'd helped them move, lent them tools, given advice, made them laugh. Everyone painted the same picture of a good man, a kind man, a man who showed up when you needed him. I wondered bitterly in the weeks that followed how he'd managed to show up for so many people when he was living two completely separate lives. Mom held herself together remarkably well during those first weeks. She made all the arrangements, called all the right people, handled the sympathy cards and the insurance paperwork and the 100 little details that come with death. I thought she was being strong for me. I thought we were in this together, two people who'd lost the center of our world. I didn't know she'd been living with suspicions for years. I didn't know she'd made a choice, long ago, to look the other way rather than confront the truth. That knowledge, when it came, felt like a second death. 3 weeks after the funeral, my phone rang while I was at work. I was in the middle of a meeting, so I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it later, there was a message from someone named Gerald Pritchard, attorney at law, asking me to call him back regarding the estate of Robert James Morrison, my dad. I called back during my lunch break, expecting it to be about some paperwork Mom had missed, some document that needed my signature. Mr. Pritchard's secretary put me through immediately. "Miss Morrison, thank you for returning my call," he said, his voice professionally neutral. "I need you to come to my office for a reading of your father's will. There are some matters that need to be addressed in person." "My mom's already been handling all the estate stuff," I said. "Is something wrong?" A pause. "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you come in tomorrow at 2 o'clock? Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Is this about money? Are there debts I don't know about? "Please, Miss Morrison. Tomorrow at 2. I'll send you the address." I told Mom about the call that evening. She was in the kitchen making dinner, the same chicken dish she'd made every Wednesday for as long as I could remember. Some routines persisted even through grief. "That's strange," she said, not looking up from the cutting board. "I already met with our lawyer. Everything was straightforward." "Our lawyer?" I asked. "Is this a different one?" "I guess so." "What's the name again?" "Gerald Pritchard." The knife in her hand stilled for just a moment. Then she resumed chopping, her movements perhaps a bit more forceful than necessary. "I don't know him. Must be related to your father's. Business or something. I'm sure it's nothing important." But her voice had that tight quality it got when she was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. I'd heard it before, over the years, usually when she was hiding a bad report card from Dad, or downplaying how much she'd spent on new furniture. I let it go. I was still in that fog of grief where nothing seemed quite real, where I moved through days on autopilot, where additional complications felt impossible to process. I should have pressed her. I should have known, from the way her shoulders tensed, from the way she suddenly became very focused on dinner, that she knew exactly what was waiting for me in that lawyer's office. The law office was in a part of town I didn't often visit, in one of those older buildings with marble floors and wood-paneled walls that spoke of establishment and money. I felt underdressed in my work clothes, out of place as I gave my name to the receptionist. "Mr. Pritchard is expecting you," she said with a practiced smile. "Conference room B, just down that hall." I walked down a corridor lined with gilt-framed diplomas and landscape paintings, my heels clicking on the polished floor. Through the frosted glass of Conference Room B, I could see shapes moving, people already gathered. I pushed open the door. Mr. Pritchard stood at the head of a long table, an older man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked up as I entered, his expression carefully controlled. "Miss Morrison, thank you for coming." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at the 3 other people in the room. A woman, maybe a few years younger than my mother, with dark hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a simple dress, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that made my blood run cold. Recognition. Beside her sat 2 young people, a boy and a girl, probably in their early 20s. The boy had Dad's nose, his jawline. The girl had his eyes, that particular shade of hazel green I'd inherited too. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. "Please, have a seat," Mr. Pritchard said gently. I didn't move. Couldn't move. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Morrison, I realize this is unexpected. Your father's will includes provisions for all of his children. It seems we need to divide the assets among all 3 of his children." The words hit me like physical blows. All three. His children. 3. What do you mean 3? My voice came out strangled. The woman shifted in her seat. She looked like she might cry. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know he told you nothing. The boy, because I couldn't think of him as my brother yet, couldn't process that, put a hand on the woman's arm. Mom, don't. Mom! The room tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. I think, Mr. Pritchard said carefully, that we need to have a conversation before we proceed with the legal matters. Miss Morrison, perhaps you'd like to sit down? I sat. Not because I wanted to, but because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The lawyer explained, his voice professional and detached, as if he were discussing a corporate merger rather than the implosion of my entire understanding of my father, my family, my life. My dad had maintained 2 households, 2 families. This woman, Diana, had been with him for 19 years. The children, Marcus and Lily, were 21 and 18. I did the math in my head. Marcus was born when I was 4. I had memories of that year, of Dad taking me to the park while Mom was sick a lot. Morning sickness? I'd later understood. Except she hadn't been pregnant. He'd been there, with this other woman, watching his second child come into the world while Mom and I waited at home. Lily was born when I was 7. That was the year Dad missed my birthday party because of a work emergency. The year he'd been gone for a week and came back with a stuffed elephant for me, guilty and overly affectionate. They knew about me? I finally managed to ask. Diana nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. He talked about you all the time, showed us pictures. You were. We thought of you as part of the family, even though we never met you. You have pictures of me? Lily spoke for the first time, her voice soft. In our living room. Dad said it was important that we knew our sister, even if we couldn't meet you. Sister. The word felt like a slap and an embrace at the same time. I stood up so abruptly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. I need to leave. Miss Morrison, we need to discuss. I need to leave, I repeated, louder this time. I walked out of that office, down that pristine hallway, past the receptionist with her professional smile, and out into the street. I made it to my car before the tears came. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, my vision blurred by tears, my mind replaying every memory of my father and finding lies hidden in all of them. The late nights he said he was working, the weekends he went on fishing trips with buddies I never met, the phone calls he'd take in another room, the way he always seemed to have an excuse ready, an explanation prepared. How long had Mom known? The thought crystallized as I drove, hardening from suspicion into certainty, her reaction to the lawyer's name, the tension in her shoulders. She'd known. Maybe not everything, but something. I turned the car toward my childhood home. Mom was reading in the living room when I burst through the front door. She looked up, startled, and her expression immediately shifted to concern when she saw my face. Honey, what's wrong? Did you know? The words came out harsh, accusatory. She paled, set down her book. Know what? Don't. I was shaking. Don't you dare lie to me right now. Did you know Dad had another family? The silence that followed was answer enough. She stood slowly, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I suspected, she said quietly. I didn't know for certain. You suspected? I laughed, a bitter sound. You suspected your husband was living a double life and you just… What? Decided to ignore it? It wasn't that simple? How long? She looked away. I don't know exactly. Maybe 10 years ago, I started noticing things. Small things. Changed patterns. The smell of different perfumes sometimes. Receipts for things I couldn't account for. 10 years. I could barely breathe. You knew for 10 years and you never told me. What was I supposed to say? Her voice rose, defensive now. That I thought your father might be cheating, but I had no proof? That I was too afraid to confront him because I didn't want to lose everything we'd built? I had a right to know. You were happy, Mom shouted back, and it was so unlike her, so raw and desperate, that I stopped. You adored your father. You had this beautiful relationship with him. How? Was I supposed to destroy that? It was a lie. My voice broke. All of it was a lie. She was crying now too. No, his love for you was real. Whatever else he did, however he failed us, his love for you was the truest thing about him. I saw it every day. The way he looked at you, the pride in his voice when he talked about you, That wasn't a lie. Then what was it? I demanded. How could he love me and do this? How could he be there for my soccer games and parent-teacher conferences and be living an entire secret life? How could he teach me about honesty and integrity when he was the biggest liar I've ever known? Mom sank back onto the couch, her hands covering her face. I don't know. God help me. I've asked myself that same question 1,000 times. I stood there in the living room of my childhood, surrounded by family photos that now felt like crime scene evidence, and felt the last piece of my foundation crumble away. I met them, I said finally. His other wife, his other kids. Mom's head snapped up. Wife? Or girlfriend or whatever she is? Diana? And Marcus and Lily? The names felt strange in my mouth. They're 21 and 18, Mom. He had another entire family and they knew about me. They had pictures of me. They thought of me as their sister. The look on Mom's face was complex pain and grief, and something that might have been relief that it was finally all out in the open. What are they like? She asked softly. I shook my head. I don't know. I left. I couldn't. I can't process this. Do you want me to? I don't know what I want. I moved toward the door. I need time. Please don't shut me out, Mom said, her voice small. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But don't shut me out. You're all I have left. I wanted to tell her that maybe she should have thought of that before she decided to live with a lie for 10 years. I wanted to scream and rage and make her hurt the way I was hurting. But I was so tired, so emotionally drained, that I couldn't summon the energy. I need space, I said instead, and walked out. I didn't talk to Mom for 3 weeks. I didn't respond to her texts or return her calls. I went to work, came home to my apartment, and existed in a kind of numb limbo. My friends noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. How do you even begin to explain that your entire life has been recontextualized? That every happy memory now comes with an asterisk? I thought about Dad constantly. I'd find myself angry at random moments in line at the grocery store, stuck in traffic, lying in bed at night. The anger would hit like a wave, overwhelming and sudden, leaving me breathless. He'd cheated on Mom. He'd lied to all of us for decades. He'd built a second life in the shadows of his first one, and he died before I could confront him, before I could demand answers, before I could tell him exactly how much he'd hurt me. The anger was easier than the other feelings, the confusion, the grief that felt somehow tainted now, the love that persisted despite everything, stubborn and painful, like trying to hold on to something sharp. I also thought about them, Marcus and Lily, my half-siblings. I'd looked them up on social media in a moment of weakness late one night. Marcus was a college student studying engineering. His photo showed a young man with an easy smile, surrounded by friends. Lily was a senior in high school, into art and photography. Her Instagram was full of beautiful, melancholy images. They looked so much like him. Like me. The lawyer called twice, leaving polite but persistent messages about needing to move forward with the estate. I deleted them both without listening all the way through. Diana called once. I stared at the unknown number on my screen, my finger hovering over the decline button, then accidentally answered when I meant to silence it. Hello. Her voice, tentative. I hung up immediately. Then I sat on my couch and cried. In the 4th week, Lily reached out on Instagram. A simple direct message. Hi. I know this is probably the last thing you want, but if you ever want to talk, Marcus and I would really like to meet you properly. No lawyers, no pressure, just coffee, if you're interested. I stared at the message for 2 days. I typed and deleted responses a dozen times. What do you say to the sister you didn't know you had? How do you even begin that conversation? Finally, I replied, okay. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. I arrived early and sat in a corner booth, my hands wrapped around a mug I wasn't drinking from, watching the door with something between dread and anticipation. They arrived together, Marcus tall and lanky, Lily smaller with Dad's hazel eyes. They spotted me immediately, family resemblance, probably, and walked over. Hi, Marcus said. He had a gentle voice. Thanks for agreeing to meet. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. They sat across from me, ordered their own drinks, and for a long moment we all just looked at each other. This is weird, Lily finally said. I surprised myself by laughing. Yeah, really weird. We don't want to make this harder for you, Marcus said. We know this has to be. I can't even imagine. Did you really know about me your whole lives? I asked. Lily nodded. Dad talked about you constantly. What you were doing, how proud he was of you. We knew you were our half-sister. And you were okay with that? With him having another family? They exchanged a glance. Marcus spoke carefully. We didn't really know any different. That was just how things were. Dad split his time. He was with us some days, with you others. Mom said he had complicated obligations. We didn't fully understand until we were older. And then? Then it was confusing, Lily admitted. I was angry for a while, especially at your mom. I thought she was the reason he couldn't be with us full time. The revelation stung. My mom didn't know about you. Or at least, she says she only suspected. We didn't know that, Marcus said quickly. Dad told us. He said both families knew about each other, that it was an arrangement everyone had agreed to. He lied to you too. Then, we sat with that. For a moment, this shared understanding that we'd all been manipulated by the same person we loved. Tell me about him, I said. Your version of him. Lily smiled, sad and fond at once. He made the best pancakes. Every Sunday morning, he'd make these ridiculous stacks with chocolate chips and whipped cream. Marcus and I would compete over who could eat more. He did the same thing with me, I said, surprised. Sunday pancakes. He'd sing while he cooked. Badly, Marcus added with a laugh. So badly. He taught me to ride a bike, Lily continued. Held onto the seat and ran behind me until I could balance. I was so scared, but he kept saying, I've got you, and eventually I believed him. My throat tightened. He did that with me too, same words. We shared more stories. The trips to the hardware store where he'd let them pick out tools of their own. The way he'd fall asleep during movies but insist he was just resting his eyes. His terrible jokes that somehow always made you laugh anyway. His pride in their accomplishments, no matter how small. With every story, I saw the same man I'd known, and yet completely different. He'd divided himself, replicated these moments, given us all the same experiences without any of us knowing. Were you happy? I asked. Growing up with him part-time? Marcus considered this. I think so. I mean, I wished he was around more. There were times when I really needed him and he couldn't be there because he was with you. But when he was there, he was really there, you know? Present, engaged. I never felt like I was missing anything, Lily said softly, until he died. And then I realized I'd been missing everything. That I only had half of him, and I'd never get the chance to have more. The grief in her voice mirrored my own. Mom says his love for us was real. I found myself saying, that whatever else was a lie, that was true. Do you believe her? Marcus asked. I don't know what I believe anymore. We talked for 3 hours. They showed me pictures from their childhood, Dad at their birthday parties, their graduations, ordinary moments that looked exactly like my own photo albums. We found the overlaps, the times when he'd left my house to go to theirs or vice versa. We pieced together the logistics of his double life, and it was both impressive and heartbreaking how much effort he'd put into maintaining both families. There's a lot more to sort out, Marcus said as we prepared to leave. The legal stuff, the house, all of that. But we want you to know we're not trying to take anything from you. Dad made his choices, and we shouldn't have to suffer for them. You're not suffering, I said. You're victims of this too. Lily hugged me goodbye, fierce and unexpected. I always wanted to meet you, she whispered, even though I knew it probably wouldn't happen. I used to look at your pictures and imagine what you were like. I hugged her back, this sister I'd never known I had, and felt something in my chest crack open, not breaking, but making room for something new. The estate proceedings were messy. Dad had left debts none of us knew about, properties in both our names and theirs, accounts that didn't add up. The lawyer worked through it methodically while we sat in uncomfortable chairs and learned the financial truth of how he'd supported 2 households. He'd been in over his head, credit cards maxed out, a second mortgage on our house that Mom hadn't known about, loans taken out in both women's names. He'd been robbing Peter to pay Paul, keeping the whole thing afloat through sheer determination and increasingly desperate financial maneuvering. He was going to lose everything, the lawyer said, during one particularly painful session. If he'd lived another year, maybe 2, it all would have collapsed. Maybe the heart attack had been a mercy, in its way. Maybe he knew what was coming and couldn't bear to face it. Diana sat across from us during these meetings, and slowly I began to see her as a person rather than the enemy. She was quiet, practical, clearly grieving. She'd worked as a nurse, had supported herself and her kids while Dad contributed what he could. She'd believed his promises that he'd leave Mom someday, that they'd be a real family. She'd waited 19 years. "I'm sorry," she told Mom during one particularly tense meeting. "I know that doesn't mean anything, but I am. He told me you knew. He told me you'd both agreed to this arrangement. I didn't know I was the other woman." Mom's face was unreadable. We were both the other woman, I think. It was the first time they'd spoken directly. Something passed between them, some shared understanding of betrayal and loss. We divvied up his belongings. The big things were easy: houses, cars, accounts. The small things were harder. Who got his tools? His watch collection? The photo albums that contained all of us, documented a life that had never really existed? "Take what you want," Mom said to Diana. "I don't want most of it." In the end, we each took pieces. I took his old baseball glove, worn soft from years of playing catch. Marcus took his fishing gear. Lily took his camera. Mom kept her wedding ring but gave Diana the necklace he'd given her, the one I now realized he'd bought on one of his business trips. We were all trying to hold on to something, some tangible proof that he'd been real, that he'd loved us, despite everything. Over the following months, Marcus, Lily, and I developed a strange kind of relationship. We weren't quite friends, not really siblings in the traditional sense, but something in between. We'd text occasionally, meet for coffee every few weeks. We were bound by blood and by the shared experience of being his children, his victims, his legacy. Marcus was studying to be an engineer, following in Dad's footsteps. He talked about their father-son conversations about buildings and structures, how things fit together. I listened and heard echoes of the same conversations I'd had with Dad, the same lessons about integrity and strength and doing things right. Lily wanted to be a photographer. She showed me her portfolio, once haunting images of abandoned places, broken things made beautiful. She'd loved Dad fiercely and was angry at him constantly now, a contradiction she couldn't reconcile. "I keep thinking about all the lies," she said one afternoon, "and then I feel guilty because he's dead and I should just remember the good things. But how do I separate the good from the bad when they're all tangled together?" I didn't have an answer for her. I was struggling with the same question. Diana and I eventually had coffee too, just the two of us. It was awkward at first, this woman who'd shared my father's bed, who'd raised his children while I lived in ignorance. But she was kind, tired, worn down by years of being second, of waiting, of believing promises that never came true. "I loved him," she said simply. "I know I shouldn't have. I know it was wrong. But I did." "Did he love you?" She smiled sadly. "I think he loved both of us. That was the problem. He couldn't choose, so he tried to have both. And in the end, he had neither. Not really. Do you hate my mom? No. How could I? We were both trying to love the same impossible man." She told me about their life together, the small apartment they'd shared, how Dad would come over after leaving our house and pretend he was coming home from work, how he'd coach Marcus's Little League team and attend Lily's school plays, how he'd spent Christmas Eve with us and Christmas Day with them, year after year, somehow making it work. He was exhausted all the minute. "Time," she said. "I see that now. Trying to be everything to everyone. It must have been unbearable." I wanted to have sympathy for him, but I wasn't ready yet. 6 months after his death, while helping Mom pack up the house to move into something smaller, I found a box in the back of Dad's closet. It was labeled Taxes 2010, but when I opened it, I found letters. Letters from Diana, letters to Dad, letters from Dad to her. Years worth of correspondence, hidden away like buried treasure or damning evidence. I sat on the closet floor and read them all. They told a story I hadn't known, how they'd met at a work conference, how they'd started an affair that was supposed to be brief, how Diana had gotten pregnant and Dad had promised to leave Mom but couldn't bring himself to do it, how she'd had Marcus anyway, deciding to raise him alone, but Dad had stayed involved. He couldn't abandon his son, so he split himself instead. The letters were love letters, painful, honest, full of promises and apologies. He wrote about his guilt, his love for both families, his inability to make a choice that would hurt someone. He wrote about me, how much he adored me, how the thought of losing me kept him from leaving Mom. "I'm caught between two lives," he wrote in one letter, "and I'm failing at both." Diana had written back, sometimes angry, sometimes understanding, always waiting. "I'll take whatever you can give," she'd written. "Any part of you is better than none." I brought the box to Mom. She read through the letters with tears streaming down her face. "He was never going to leave," she said finally. "He was never going to choose. Would you have stayed if you'd known for sure?" She thought about this for a long time. "I don't know. I was afraid of being alone, afraid of admitting my marriage was a lie. And I did love him, despite everything." Does that make me weak? I think it makes you human. We burned the letters in the fireplace that night, watching years of secrets turn to ash. It felt ceremonial somehow, like laying a ghost to rest. A year after Dad's death, we all gathered at his grave. Mom, Diana, me, Marcus, and Lily. It wasn't planned, exactly. We'd each come on the anniversary, and found ourselves there together. The headstone was simple. Robert James Morrison. Beloved father. We'd fought over the wording. Husband felt like a lie, but what else do you say? What words sum up a life of love and deception? Diana had brought flowers. Purple irises, his favorite. "I didn't know he liked irises," Mom said. "I didn't know he liked roses," Diana replied, looking at the flowers Mom had brought. We stood there in silence, 5 people bound by our relationship to a man who'd been both wonderful and terrible, present and absent, truthful and deceitful. "I miss him," Lily said softly. "Is that okay? Am I allowed to miss him?" "Yes," we all said, at different moments, overlapping. Because that was the truth we were all learning to live with. You could love someone and hate what they'd done. You could grieve someone and be angry at them. You could miss someone and never forgive them. All these contradictions could exist at once. Marcus started visiting our house sometimes, helping Mom with repairs Dad would have done. He had his father's hands, his competence with tools. Lily and I went to art galleries together, discovering a shared love of photography. Diana and Mom weren't friends exactly, but they'd become something else. 2 women who'd survived the same storm and understood each other in ways no one else could. We were building something from the wreckage. Not a traditional family, but a family nonetheless. Born from lies, but trying to live in truth. I think about Dad differently now. Not with the uncomplicated love of my childhood, but with something more complex. I see his weakness, his selfishness, his cowardice. But I also see the man who loved fiercely, who wanted to be everything to everyone, who couldn't bear to hurt anyone and ended up hurting everyone. He was deeply flawed. Maybe we all are, just not always on such a dramatic scale. The half-siblings I never knew I had are part of my life now. Marcus calls me when he needs advice about school. Lily and I text memes back and forth, building the kind of sibling relationship most people start in childhood. We're learning from each other, piecing together our shared DNA while acknowledging the different worlds we grew up in. Mom is doing better. She's dating someone, a kind man who knows her whole story and doesn't judge. She's learning to trust again, slowly. Diana keeps in touch. We'll never be close, but there's respect there, recognition. Sometimes I look at pictures of Dad and I can see the strain around his eyes, the weight he was carrying. The exhaustion Diana mentioned. He was spinning plates, trying to keep everything in the air, knowing one day it would all come crashing down. Maybe the heart attack was his body giving up on an impossible task. I'm still angry sometimes. The anger comes in waves, usually when I'm reminded of what I lost, not just him, but the version of him I thought I knew. The certainty of my childhood, the simplicity of loving someone without complication. But I'm also grateful, in a strange way, for Marcus and Lily, these surprise siblings who've enriched my life. For the truth, however painful. For the understanding that people are complicated, that love isn't simple, that family takes many forms. We're all just pieces of him, trying to make sense of the wreckage he left behind. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we take the good parts of his work ethic, his humor, his capacity for love, and leave behind the rest. Maybe we build something better from what he broke. I went back to his grave recently, alone. I sat in the grass and talked to him like I used to, except this time I said all the things I wish I'd known to ask while he was alive. Why couldn't you choose? Why wasn't one family enough? How did you live with the lies for so long? Did you know how much it would hurt us? Did you even think about the day we'd all find out? The stone offered no answers, but sitting there, I realized maybe there aren't answers that would satisfy me. Maybe he didn't have good reasons. Maybe he was just a man making terrible choices, trying to hold on to everything, unable to let go of anything. I told him I loved him. I told him I hated what he did. I told him I was going to be okay, that we all were, that we'd find a way to move forward. And then I left. walking away from the grave toward the parking lot where Lily was waiting. We had plans for lunch, then we were going to help Marcus move into his new apartment. We were building our own traditions now, separate from Dad but shaped by him nonetheless. Family isn't just what you're born into. Sometimes it's what you build from the pieces you're left with. And sometimes, in the rubble and ruin, you find something worth keeping.